When I brought a woman into our home, she tried to manipulate me, but I didn't let her. I had prepared a move that changed everything. And only when the truth came out did I realize who was really playing this game. You won't believe what happened next. I never thought I'd see something like this in my own home. But there I was, standing in the shadow of the doorway, watching as my wife, the woman I had spent years with, knelt before a stranger, pressing herself against him as if I had never existed. It started a few months ago. Melissa had changed. At first, I didn't think much of her new style. Short dresses, tight tops, high heels that had never been part of her wardrobe before. She started spending more time in front of the mirror, experimenting with makeup. I thought it was just a desire to refresh her look, until the parties began. "Cole, we have guests tonight, don't forget," she said one evening when I came home from work. I walked into the living room and saw two unfamiliar men sitting on the couch, casually sipping whiskey. Melissa laughed, playfully twirling her hair. "This is Tom and Victor, they're great guys." Her voice was too cheerful, too forced. I reached out for a handshake, feeling something cold settle inside me. The guests became a regular thing. I would come home from work and see different men showing up in our house. Always new faces. Always the same smile on Melissa's lips. "They're just friends, Cole," she said whenever I asked who they were. But I saw the way they looked at her. One evening, I stayed in my car, parked outside the house, and decided not to go in right away. Through the window, I saw her welcoming another guest. She led him inside, laughing, touching his arm. Then the door closed. The next day at work, Kate approached me. She worked in the department next to mine. "Cole, you're such a good man," she said one day as we stood together by the coffee machine. I looked at her, not understanding where this was going. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here," she said, her eyes full of genuine sympathy. I didn't respond. But later that night, when I saw Melissa melting into the arms of yet another guest, I remembered Kate's words. I didn't know what to do, but I knew this couldn't go on forever. I opened the living room door and saw her kneeling in front of him, laughing, leaning closer. He wrapped his arms around her waist, whispering something in her ear. She didn't push him away. She didn't resist. She was enjoying it. That night, I didn't say anything. I walked past them, silent, pretending I saw nothing. But inside, I was breaking apart. Melissa had changed. I saw it in the little things. Her phone was always with her now. She would smile at the screen while answering messages. I noticed traces of other men's hands on her skin, faint red fingerprints on her wrist, kisses on her neck that she tried to hide under a thin layer of powder. "Cole, we're having a party tonight." She said it like it was nothing unusual, but I knew what would happen. Loud music, alcohol, strangers filling our home. And then, when I went to bed, Melissa wouldn't come to our bedroom. That night, I decided not to sleep. I left the door slightly open and waited. It was around 3 in the morning when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Quiet, careful. I got up and walked to the door. I looked into the living room. Melissa stood by the couch, leaning over a man who sat there, reclining lazily. She was speaking to him, her hand sliding across his chest, and then she sat down beside him, crossing her legs. I clenched my fists, breathing deeply through my nose. What should I do? Start a fight? Throw her out of the house? I turned back to my room and shut the door. At work, I ran into Kate again. "Cole, are you okay?" I wanted to say yes, but the words got stuck in my throat. She looked at me longer than usual, and I realized she already knew everything. "Do you want to take a walk after work?" I hesitated, but then I nodded. We walked through the quiet streets of the city, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. Kate talked about little things, avoiding the topic that lay between us. It was the right thing to do. I wasn't ready to talk about it, but she was there. The next day, I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet. I walked into the living room. The couch, the tables, everything was in perfect order. But as I stepped closer, I saw it. A faint trace of powder on the back of the couch. And the smell. A foreign, masculine scent. I went upstairs. The bedroom was empty, but the blanket on the bed was rumpled. Then I heard the sound of water. The shower. I approached the bathroom door, placing my hand on the doorknob. The water was running, steam filling the space, obscuring everything from view. But I knew she wasn't in there alone. I didn't open the door. I simply stepped back. I needed proof. Real proof. I started being more careful. I waited for her to make a mistake. And she did. One day, I saw her leave her phone on the kitchen counter. This was my only chance. I picked it up, unlocked it, and the first thing that caught my eye, dozens of messages. Tonight was so hot. I want you again. When is your husband leaving? And her replies. He doesn't suspect a thing. I'll just say they're friends. We need to be more careful. I took screenshots, sent them to myself, and then I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I quickly put the phone back. She walked into the kitchen, smiling. Cole, what are you doing here? I looked at her, just thinking. She suspected nothing, but now I had proof, and now I didn't care who else saw it. That evening, I called her parents. Come over. We need to talk. They agreed. Melissa had no idea, and that was her final mistake. I stood by the door, watching as she walked into the house, completely unaware that this would be the last night she felt safe. There was no worry in her eyes, no fear. She still thought she was in control. Melissa took off her coat, looking at me with that same easy smile that I once thought was genuine. How was your day? I just nodded, revealing nothing, thinking about how soon that smile would disappear. She walked into the kitchen, not knowing that in an hour, her parents would be here, and I would show them everything I knew. An hour later, the doorbell rang. I heard Melissa rise quickly from the chair in the living room. She wasn't expecting visitors, and it unsettled her. Who is it? Her voice carried a hint of tension. I opened the door. Her parents stood on the threshold. Her mother looked at me with slight concern. Cole, what's going on? I stepped aside, letting them in. You'll see for yourselves. Melissa froze near the couch, eyes wide. What is this? Why are you here? I pulled out my phone, opened the gallery. Sit down, Melissa. We have something to talk about. She took a step back, the confidence draining from her face. Cole, what are you doing? I pressed play. A loud male voice, her laughter, moans, words that left no room for doubt. It was recorded in our home. Her mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Her father remained silent, but I saw the way his fists clenched. Melissa's gaze darted between us. It's not what you think. I switched to the photos, showing her messages. She stepped toward me, trying to snatch the phone, but I moved back. Cole, stop. Not in front of my parents. Exactly in front of them, Melissa. They need to know who you've become. Her mother sank onto the couch, clutching her head. God. Melissa, what have you done? Her father stepped closer to her. I didn't raise you for this. His voice was low, heavy. We always thought you were a good wife, that you valued your family. I didn't mean. Her voice cracked. I looked at her and realized there was no more anger, no more regret, just emptiness. In the end, it doesn't matter anymore. I won't forgive you, and I won't save this marriage. Melissa closed her eyes, running her hands over her face. Cole, please. It's too late. Her parents remained silent. I could see the changes in their expressions, the realization settling in. Her mother looked like she was on the verge of tears. Her father looked at her as if she were a stranger. Pack your things and leave. I spoke calmly, without emotion. Tonight. Melissa didn't believe it at first. Her gaze darted to her mother, then to her father. You're not going to let him. But her father had already turned toward the door. We can't help you, Melissa. You made your choice. Now live with the consequences. I walked past her, heading to the bedroom. You have 1 hour. And I closed the door, leaving her in shock. But this wasn't the end. I knew she wouldn't give up that easily, and that there were still many surprises ahead. I knew she wouldn't just leave. Melissa never accepted defeat. She could pretend to be broken. She could cry, beg, but deep down, she always wanted one thing: control. 2 days had passed since I told her to pack her things. The whole time, she hadn't left the bedroom, and when I returned from work, I would see her in the kitchen, calm, thoughtful, without tears. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't talk about her mistakes, and that made me wary. Cole, Her voice was soft as she approached me that evening. I was sitting in my chair, scrolling through my phone, but I looked up. What? She sat down next to me, her fingers barely brushing my hand. I ruined everything, but I want to fix it. I laughed. Fix it? Melissa, what is there to fix? She moved back slightly but didn't lose her confidence. I understand that you're angry, but we can start over. I can change. You already changed. And I saw it. She tilted her head, looking directly into my eyes. Give me a chance to prove that I'm still your wife. I remained silent, waiting to see what she would say next. Let's try living together first, as friends. No fights, no anger. If you realize you can't forgive me, I'll leave. I studied her face, trying to understand what she was really planning. And you'll just walk away if I say no? Yes. She pressed her lips together, as if deciding whether to add something else. But first, give me a chance. Her voice was quiet, almost sincere. The next few days were strange. She actually behaved calmly, even attentively. She cleaned the house, cooked, asked about my day. And while I didn't allow myself to trust her, I couldn't ignore the change. And then something happened that I didn't expect. One evening, as I was coming home, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked near our house. It looked familiar, but at first, I didn't think much of it. I opened the door and heard a man's voice in the living room. Cole, you're home already? Melissa's voice sounded unusually cheerful. I stepped into the living room and saw him. A young, tall, athletic man was sitting on my couch, holding a glass of wine. His posture was relaxed. He didn't even pretend to feel uncomfortable. This is Trevor, Melissa said, smiling. He'll be staying with us for a while. I felt the anger rising inside me. What? She stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder as if this were something normal. Trevor has nowhere to stay, and I thought, why not help him? I turned my gaze to the man. He sat there, looking at me confidently, as if assessing me. Is this a joke? My voice was cold. Cole, you said we try to live peacefully. You're not against it, are you? I clenched my jaw. She was pushing me to the edge. On purpose. Trevor raised his glass toward me, as if in a toast. I hope we can get along, buddy. She was watching me, waiting for a reaction, testing me. I didn't answer. I just turned and left the room. When I closed the door behind me, I realized I couldn't take it anymore. In my house, in my life, now lived some Trevor, who Melissa had brought in like it was completely normal. She was playing some kind of game, and I didn't know where it was leading, but I could feel this wasn't the end. I got into my car, started the engine, and just drove off, not knowing where I was going. All I wanted was to forget, to shut my mind off. Damn, Cole, you should have told me it was this bad. Jake set another glass of whiskey in front of me. I had met up with him at a bar near downtown. Jake was an old friend, someone who knew me before marriage, someone who had always said Melissa was trouble. He had been right, and now I knew it. But it was too late. She brought another man into our home, I muttered, staring at my drink. Jake stifled a laugh, but couldn't hide the look on his face. So what? Is she turning your place into a hostel for her lovers now? I don't know what she's up to, I replied. But she's acting like nothing happened. Jake shook his head, taking a long sip. Cole, you do realize she's manipulating you, right? She wants you to snap, to do something you'll regret. I knew that, but knowing didn't make it any easier. So what now? He asked. I was about to answer when I felt someone watching me. She was sitting at the bar, elegant, with long, wavy chestnut hair, looking straight at me. There was something intriguing in her eyes, almost challenging. I looked away, but a minute later, she was already beside me. Rough day? Her voice was calm but had a hint of mischief. Jake glanced at me and raised an eyebrow. Cole, you don't know Lauren, do you? I looked at him. You know her? She works at my sister's company. We've crossed paths. Lauren, this is Cole. Cole, this is Lauren. She extended her hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. Nice to meet you, Cole. I didn't know what came over me, but I didn't feel like being polite. If you came over to entertain me, you're wasting your time. She smiled, unfazed. Are you always this rude, or is today just a bad day? Jake snorted, turning away, but I could see him smirking. Trust me, Today is a terrible day, I replied. Then you're in luck, because I know how to make it better. I gave her a skeptical look as she leaned in closer. You need revenge, Cole? There was a playful glint in her eyes, and suddenly, I was curious to know exactly what she had in mind. I took another sip of whiskey, and I had a feeling that this night would mark the beginning of something new. I just didn't know what exactly. When I opened the door, I heard sounds that made me stop. At first, quiet moans, then whispers, and finally, muffled laughter. There was no doubt about what was happening. Melissa wasn't even trying to hide it. She wasn't just bringing another man into our house anymore. She was sleeping with him right here, in my home, in our bedroom. I stood in the hallway, clenching my fists, feeling the blood rush to my face. She really wanted to break me. She wanted me to explode, to do something reckless. But this time, I wasn't going to play by her rules. I slowly turned around and walked out of the house. The next day, I invited Lauren over. Do you have plans for tonight? I asked in a message. She replied almost immediately. What are you suggesting? I didn't have to think for long. I want you to come over. Let's spend some time together. I waited for her response. This was my move in the game Melissa had started. If she could do whatever she wanted right under my nose, then I had every right to do the same. A minute later, Lauren replied. Why not? Send me the address. I smirked, imagining how Melissa would react to this. When Lauren arrived, Melissa was home. She was sitting in the living room, watching a movie, and Trevor was nowhere to be seen. I could feel her eyes on me as I opened the door and let Lauren inside. Oh, and here's our lovely hostess, Lauren smiled, walking past Melissa without even pausing. Melissa slowly set her cup down on the table, her eyes narrowing dangerously. Cole, who is this? I walked calmly to the kitchen, acting as if nothing unusual was happening. This is Lauren. She's staying for dinner. I heard Melissa inhale sharply. She wasn't expecting this. Oh, how sweet. Her voice was sugary, but I knew that tone. She was angry. Lauren stepped closer, lightly touching my shoulder. The atmosphere here feels a little tense. I thought you said you were getting a divorce? I barely held back a smirk. Lauren understood the situation and played her part perfectly. Melissa pressed her lips together, looking between me and Lauren. Cole, can I talk to you for a minute? I pretended to think about it. No, Melissa, Lauren and I are about to have some wine. Would you like to join us? I saw the fire flicker in her eyes. You're seriously going to entertain yourself in our home? Lauren chuckled. I think it's not your home anymore. Right, Cole? I looked at Melissa and saw her fists clenching. She wanted to control me, to make me suffer over her betrayal. But now the situation had changed. She suddenly stood up. Fine, do whatever you want. I don't care. She turned and walked upstairs. I turned back to Lauren. You play very well. She raised her wine glass, smiling. This is just the beginning. I realized that now we were playing by my rules. I woke up to a strange sound. The room was dark, with only a faint glow from the streetlight outside. I slowly sat up, listening. Someone was in the house. My heart pounded in my chest as I got out of bed. Lauren was asleep beside me, her hair sprawled across the pillow. I carefully walked to the door and cracked it open. Melissa was standing in the hallway. She was looking at me. What are you doing? I whispered. She took a step forward, and I saw something shiny in her hand. A phone. She held it up, and the screen was lit with a recording. Can you imagine what will happen if I show this to everyone? Her voice was cold. I moved closer, trying to see what it was. What is that? She pressed play, and familiar sounds filled the silence. It was me. Me and Lauren. The sound of my voice, her laughter, and then, the moments we spent together in this room. Melissa stood with a stony expression. You think you can play games with me, Cole? You think I'll just walk away and leave you alone? I clenched my jaw. You recorded us? She smiled. There are cameras in this house. Did you forget? I installed them back when I was afraid we might get robbed. You knew about them. I understood now. She wasn't just manipulating me. She had been waiting for the right moment to strike. And what are you planning to do with it? She tilted her head. That depends on you. Meaning? If Lauren leaves this house and you never see her again, I'll delete the recording. If not, I felt anger boiling inside me. You wouldn't dare. Want to test me? I stepped closer, but she took a step back. Have you ever wondered if Lauren has secrets too? What do you mean? Her smile widened. I did a little digging about her. And you know what? She's not as innocent as you think. I didn't believe her at first, but when I saw the look on her face, a feeling of unease crept over me. If you know something, say it. Not now. She twirled the phone in her hand. But trust me, you'll regret bringing her into this house. I stood in the darkness, listening to her words, and for the first time, I realized this fight was far from over. What if Lauren was playing her own game too? Cole stood in the dark, watching Melissa, who was still holding the phone in front of her. Her words cut deep into his mind, and he couldn't decide who was truly manipulating him, Lauren or Melissa. But what she said about Lauren started to sound like more than just a threat. Cole felt his heart pounding. Melissa was ruthless, and he had already experienced her ability to turn situations in her favor. But this time was different. He wasn't afraid of her anymore. He wasn't the man she could easily break. Lauren, even if she was playing a game, was still his ally. Melissa tilted her head, her eyes gleaming coldly. If you want me to delete this recording, she said, you need to stop whatever you have with Lauren. Otherwise, I'll show this video to everyone. Your reputation will be ruined. Cole laughed. Melissa didn't realize he didn't care about his reputation. All he wanted now was revenge. Maybe this betrayal was the final straw for him. She had always been manipulative, but now he felt that this fight wasn't over. And that was the thing. He wasn't afraid anymore. You're not capable of much more, Melissa, he said calmly. But Lauren, maybe she has her own plans. Her face turned red with anger, but she said nothing. She just turned and walked away. Cole returned to the room. Lauren, awakened by the noise in the hallway, was sitting on the bed, her dark eyes watching him closely. What happened? She asked quietly. Cole didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, his fingers brushing against the cold glass. His thoughts were racing in all directions. This isn't over, he finally said. Melissa is threatening to expose our relationship. Lauren sighed. She can't do that. She doesn't know everything that's going on. It's just threats. But Cole noticed how her voice had become slightly less confident. You don't mean to say that she actually knows more? He asked, turning to her. Lauren didn't respond, but her eyes flickered with an unexpected excitement. Don't worry, she continued. Everything will be fine. But Cole wasn't so sure anymore. Now it was clear to him. If Melissa had kept him in the dark for so long, she definitely had more cards up her sleeve than he had imagined. The next day, when he returned from work, the house smelled of freshly cooked food. Lauren had prepared a meal, and her presence felt strange to him, but he sensed that this was more than just a coincidence. Melissa was so relentless in her game that Cole began to doubt his own decisions. Had he done the right thing by becoming part of this tangled web? Lauren was in the kitchen when Cole walked in. You still haven't told me about your plans, he said, taking off his coat. Lauren turned to him, her eyes unreadable. I thought you knew what I was doing, she said quietly. That's when Cole realized there was something else he didn't know. Lauren wasn't who he thought she was. Something about her behavior seemed off. And then he remembered something important. A few weeks ago, Lauren had mentioned that she had helped arrange some business meetings for Melissa with people Cole didn't like. She also had connections with people linked to Trevor. That moment became a turning point for Cole. Lauren had her own motives, and he wasn't sure if this was just about getting back at Melissa. You helped her? He asked, his voice cold and firm. Lauren didn't answer, but her gaze became more distant. A heavy silence hung between them. Lauren, are you actually working with her? Cole took a step forward. Lauren quickly raised a hand. No, Cole. I didn't do anything to hurt you. I just helped with a few things, but I never meant to mislead you. Cole lowered his gaze, watching as she nervously fidgeted with the food on the table. He didn't know why she was hiding all of this, but his intuition told him something was wrong again. This is getting too complicated, Lauren, he said, feeling the coldness inside him grow stronger. I don't know who to trust anymore. At that moment, the ringing of a phone shattered the silence, and without thinking, Cole picked it up. Cole, it's me, Melissa. came the voice on the other end. What do you want, Melissa? He asked sharply. I think you're going to learn something very interesting about Lauren today, she said, and there was a hint of laughter in her voice. And you'll realize that this is only the beginning. Cole stood in the darkness, holding the phone, feeling his heart pound harder with every word Melissa spoke. She promised to reveal some secrets about Lauren, and every breath she took felt like a threat. He didn't know if she really had some incriminating information, or if this was just another attempt at manipulation. But what she said made him think. What if Lauren had something hidden that he had yet to discover? Melissa remained silent on the line, but the laughter that followed her last words was so cold that it seemed to pass right through him, leaving behind a feeling of fear and doubt. What do you mean? Cole asked, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm just saying that maybe there are things about Lauren that you don't know, Melissa replied, her voice taut like a stretched wire. Cole felt his heart jump as she continued. If you want to keep things between us, you'd better start paying attention to what you're doing. He felt that there was more to her words than just a threat. They were pulling him into a deeper game, where the rules had long since blurred, and he wasn't sure who was really in control. Cole felt irritation turning into anger. He didn't like how Melissa was trying to manipulate him, and he especially didn't like the thought that Lauren might be part of this plan. You want me to trust you? He asked, his voice filled with all the anger he felt. You're just trying to play with my emotions. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then Melissa quietly replied, I'm not the kind of person who plays with emotions. You're just not ready for what's coming. Cole realized there was no room for doubt in this situation. He couldn't let Melissa manipulate him, and Lauren was the one he had to protect. He took a deep breath and set his phone down on the small table by the door. He needed to decide what to do next. He slowly turned back to the room, where Lauren was still sitting on the bed, as if nothing had happened. She was calm. Her gaze remained curious, but in her eyes, Cole noticed something new. A shadow of anxiety. If Lauren was truly confident, she wouldn't be keeping secrets. And now, Cole knew he couldn't trust her completely. What did she want? Lauren asked as Cole walked back toward her. She has some information. She's probably trying to force me to accept her terms, Cole replied, though he couldn't hide the frustration in his voice. Lauren raised an eyebrow, but her expression didn't change. Are you going to believe her again? You know how she manipulates. Cole didn't answer. His mind was already working faster, trying to piece together what had happened. Why Melissa was suddenly so persistent and why Lauren looked so calm when everything around them was starting to fall apart. Lauren stood up from the bed and walked toward him. What do you want to do? She asked, her voice softer now. Cole gathered his thoughts. Maybe I should find out the truth for myself. If Melissa knows more about you, I need to know what it is. Otherwise, this could end very badly for both of us. Lauren didn't respond. She only nodded, her eyes unreadable. This was yet another situation where she could either be with him or against him. Meanwhile, he already felt the situation slipping out of his control. All he wanted was to protect himself and Lauren. But the more he tried to understand, the more lost he became in his own assumptions. Cole turned toward the door, once again observing her behavior. Lauren didn't look as confident as before. He decided that he really couldn't trust her completely. She clearly had a secret he didn't yet know about. And if Melissa truly revealed it, it could leave him with nothing. At that moment, Lauren gathered her things and quietly left the room. Cole was left alone, his thoughts tangled between suspicions and fear. What was she hiding? Hearing Lauren mention secrets, Cole felt his heart skip a beat. Could she have some connection to Melissa? All these moves and words felt like part of a game where the rules were unknown, and the winner would be whoever acted first. Cole stopped by the door, watching as Lauren seemed to be preparing to say something, but she remained silent. There was something unreadable in her eyes, as if she was playing on both sides. What do you mean? He asked, trying to understand what was really happening. Lauren gave a faint smile, but it wasn't as carefree as usual. She stepped closer, not breaking eye contact. Everything you do has consequences. Melissa isn't the only thing you should be worried about, she said, her voice calm but pulsing with some hidden threat. Cole felt the shift in the atmosphere. His instincts were on high alert, and this no longer felt like a situation where he would simply come out as the hero. Lauren wasn't just another player. She was hiding something much bigger. He clenched his fists, ready for whatever came next. "You mean you're in the game too?" he asked quietly, barely believing his own words. Lauren looked at him and nodded. "Sometimes, to win, you have to play by different rules. But you still haven't figured out who's really holding the cards." Still lacking a clear answer to her words, Cole hesitated for a moment. He couldn't understand why Lauren, who had always been just curious and confident, was suddenly acting so mysterious. What did she mean? And why did her words strike such a deep chord in him? Lauren took a step back and nodded toward the kitchen. "Melissa thinks she's in control. But trust me, she has no idea how much the balance of power has shifted." Cole felt his nerves beginning to burn. Could Melissa be playing him again? His perception had long been distorted, but this was something new. And now Lauren, no longer just a woman from his past, was becoming part of this chaos. He followed Lauren into the kitchen, but couldn't shake the feeling that he had another choice. Melissa seemed like she had been thrown off balance. And with that thought, he set his doubts aside for later. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, approaching the table and looking at Lauren. Lauren smiled again, but this time, her smile was mysterious. "The choice is always yours, Cole. You started all of this. Now show how you're going to end it." At that very moment, the kitchen door swung open sharply. Melissa stood in the doorway, her expression both fearful and furious. She caught Cole and Lauren's gaze, and it seemed as if she already knew something was off. "What are you two doing here?" Her voice was sharp. Cole didn't answer immediately. Everything was too tangled. Melissa watched them, and it seemed like she had already figured something important out. "I'm just talking to Lauren," Cole replied, trying to keep his composure. Melissa frowned. "I don't know what you're trying to do, but I think you've had enough fun already," she said, looking at Cole with a mocking glare. Lauren raised an eyebrow and, as Melissa stepped closer, quietly said, "You think you can control everything? You've got a lot of skeletons in your closet, Melissa. And trust me, I know exactly what to do with them." Those words didn't go unnoticed. Melissa froze in place, and Cole looked at both of them, trying to understand what these connections meant and whose side each of them was truly on. "What are you trying to say?" Melissa asked, eyeing Lauren suspiciously. Lauren gave a slight smile. "You'll only find out what really matters when it's already too late." And with that realization, Melissa lost her composure and slammed her hand against the table, as if trying to prove she was still in control. But that was her last attempt. The balance of power had shifted. Melissa stood in the room, her face like a mask. She clenched her fists, but it didn't change the fact that things weren't going the way she had thought. Lauren was right. The situation she had gotten herself into had long since slipped from her grasp. "What do you mean?" Melissa asked, her voice now sounding anxious. Lauren stood near the table, smiling faintly. Her eyes shone with confidence, but Cole noticed something unusual in her restraint, almost as if she was hiding something. "You still don't understand how trapped you are, Melissa," Lauren said calmly. "And when all of this comes to light, you'll be standing right on the edge, unable to walk away without losing something." Melissa felt her body trembling with anger. She looked at Cole, who stood off to the side, observing the situation. If not for his actions, she would still be in control. But now, everything had changed. "You have no idea what you're talking about." Melissa's voice filled the room with sharp, almost piercing frustration. "You think you can break everything, but you don't know me that well." Lauren paused, as if considering her words, but her gaze remained unwavering. "Do you still think I don't know?" she asked. "Every move you make, every little secret you've kept, I know them all. And because you've always been the one in control, that's exactly why you're standing here now, furious, unable to change anything." Melissa leaned forward as if ready to lash out, but at that moment, Cole stepped in, stopping her. He finally understood what was happening. Melissa had been trying to control everyone, and now her control was crumbling. "Stop," he said sharply. "Enough. I'm not playing your games anymore, Melissa." Melissa took a step back, as if she hadn't expected this turn. Cole looked at Lauren and realized that this was no longer just a conflict between him and his wife. This was bigger. This was a fight for control, for everything he had, for his dignity, for his freedom. I don't want this game anymore, he continued, looking Melissa straight in the eye. I don't want to be part of your manipulations. Lauren never took her eyes off Melissa, her gaze gleaming in the dimly lit room. She knew that this game was reaching its climax. You still think you can fool me, Cole? Melissa asked, her voice now barely above a whisper, but laced with cruelty. I have more than you can imagine. But another emotion appeared on her face, fear. The fear that the situation was slipping out of her control. Cole took a few steps toward her, but his heart remained firm. You stopped being my wife a long time ago, he said with cold determination. Now Melissa stood in silence, her lips pressed together. At that moment, there was no defensive mask on her face, only shock and disappointment. Lauren looked at Cole and said, He's right. And I know that nothing you do now will bring back what you've lost. Melissa gasped, trying to respond. But the words wouldn't come out. Cole looked at Melissa, feeling that his heart no longer ached for this woman. Melissa was not the one he had dreamed of building a life with. Now he saw her true face, manipulative, cold, calculating. Lauren stepped closer to him and took his hand. Now you understand that this game is over, she said quietly. Melissa took a few unsteady steps back, her face turning pale. She realized this was no longer her fight. She had lost. And at that moment, Cole felt a heavy weight lift off his shoulders. Lauren led him toward the door. The choice is made, she said as Cole stopped near the exit. Melissa, still standing in place, watched their backs as they walked away. She knew there was nothing she could change now. She had tried to manipulate everyone, but in the end, she had become the victim of her own game. This isn't over, she whispered, but her words never reached Cole and Lauren. They walked out of the house, leaving Melissa behind in her world of lies and loneliness. Was Melissa truly ready for the moment when her manipulations would turn against her?